Good afternoon. My name is Hunter Manning, and this is just a brief discussion over the readings for the mind maps for week 2. So the first of the 3 Blumenberg readings that went into this mind map, it was called Phenomenological Aspects on Life World and Technization. And in my opinion, this was probably the second hardest of the 3 readings. I thought it introduced some pretty abstract concepts that obviously was the first reading, so I didn't really have a whole lot of experience in this, and that kind of added a layer of difficulty for me. So from my understanding, the basic idea of this passage is that it's kind of making us rethink the divide between nature and technology. Naturally we think that nature and technology are opposite ends of the spectrum, but from my understanding, Blumenberg's trying to say that's not the case, but he's saying that technology is what arises from nature. And so when my group came across that, we kind of asked the question, if technology is coming from nature, does that mean technology is natural? And so that felt like it kind of contradicts everything that we've ever been taught. So it was kind of a hard pill to swallow, and I have a hard time understanding Blumenberg in that case. And so in this passage, Blumenberg's leaning on the idea of the life world to explain how technology grows out of human experience. And it's not just about making tools, it's about how we remake the world and in process change how we understand ourselves. And so Blumenberg is warning that the idea of technization risks us losing our own self-understanding and critical reflection. And this immediately made me think of the last lab in General Chemistry 1. For the last lab, they give you no protocol, but you have to figure out the end result given no protocol. And so it pretty much just tests us and makes sure that we're actually understanding what's going on in the lab and in the class itself, which naturally most of us did not. So I think there were some interesting parallels between that and the Blumenberg reading. Alright, so moving on to the second of the 3 Blumenberg readings, I thought this was probably the easiest of the 3, and I'm not sure if it's because we had already read one Blumenberg before we went into this one, but I feel like the concepts in this one were probably a little bit easier than the phenomenology reading. So from my understanding, this reading is pretty much tracing how our relationship to nature and technology has shifted over history. And so Blumenberg uses examples from the ancient Greeks, and so for them, nature was seen as self-sufficient. So things had their own inner force that guide them, and I think he used the example of an acorn becoming an oak. And humans didn't really see themselves as separate. Their techne, which is similar to craftsmanship, was more about cooperating with nature than actually dominating it. And so then contemplation arose, and it was even more valued than techne. And that was pretty much about understanding truth itself and not acting or building upon it. So then Blumenberg moves into the impact of religion on this way of life. And so he primarily dives into Christianity, playing a big impact on this. And so he says that with Christianity, nature is no longer eternal, and it was actually God's creation. So with this, humans were also seen as set apart from nature, and were kind of given a sort of autonomy over it. And so this laid the groundwork for modern thinking, and we now see nature as raw material for technical manipulation. So with this, Blumenberg starts moving into the idea of the second creation. And in this, we no longer actually imitate nature. We use technology to fully replace it or even improve on it on some circumstances. And so with this, Blumenberg moves into the idea of the demonism of technology, which is essentially when technology starts getting a mind of its own and acting in ways its creators didn't intend to do. And so I immediately thought of social media when this arose in the reading, and my group did the same. We noticed that with certain algorithms, like on Instagram, it'll start pulling things that you have absolutely no interest in and starts almost acting like it has a mind of its own, saying, oh, this user might be interested in this or that. And so I think that highlights the demonism of technology well. So then we move on to the third Blumenberg reading. And this one, in all honesty, took me a while, and I'm still not sure I even fully 100% understand it, but I'm going to do my best. So this one was titled The Metaphorics of the Mighty Truth. And from my understanding, Blumenberg is pretty much exploring how metaphors like light, force, and imprint, I believe was the last one, have shaped the way humans imagine truth throughout history. And so he's arguing that even in modern philosophy, which claims to build truth through reason, still unconsciously relies on these older images of truth, like light and force, as something active and overpowering. And so for Blumenberg, truth isn't really fully constructed or fully revealed. It's rather a dynamic relationship where reality and human thought are meeting. And so throughout this reading, I kind of had the question, are these metaphors even used today? I mean, because this writing was from quite some time ago. I mean, not an extremely long time ago, but before I was born for sure. And I got to wonder, are these metaphors like light and force, are they still used, and do they still shape how we think about truth today? And as I thought about it, certainly. I mean, even if we don't notice it, even in science, we talk about shedding light on a problem or revealing hidden truths. And this pretty much reflects the old metaphor of truth as illumination. And even in everyday life, we say things like, that truth hit me hard, or it left a mark on me, which shows that metaphors like force and imprint still underline how we think today. And so Blumenberg's point is that these metaphors still influence how we imagine truth, even in an age that prides itself on being rational. Okay, so now we're moving away from Blumenberg and towards Spengler. So in this, we read chapter 11 of Decline of the West, and from my understanding, Spengler is arguing that Western science isn't neutral knowledge, and rather it reflects a cultural mindset. And so he calls this the Faustian spirit, which has taken over the West. So in this spirit, it drives us to push boundaries, control nature, and break the world down into data, laws, and systems, and pretty much like we're turning nature into a machine. As he contrasts this Western mindset with the mindset of ancient Greeks, for them, nature wasn't something that is conquered. Rather, it's something that we observed and reflect and balanced in artistic ways. And so their science and art worked in harmony with the world around them, as opposed to ours, which focuses on domination of the nature. And so for Spengler, the Faustian drive of the West shows that we've entered one of the later phases of our culture. So in this, creative energy is fading and technical mastery takes over society. It's not about creating new meaning anymore. It's about perfecting systems and maintaining control of the systems we already have in place. So think about how modern life revolves around managing technology and climate systems, AI, social networks, things like that. These things often feel like they're running ahead of us, and I think this reflects the Faustian drive pretty well. And so from my understanding, for Spengler, this obsession with control is not progress. It's a warning of cultural decline, pretty much. And so now we get to move on to the last of the 5 readings for this. This one is The Question Concerning Technology by Heidegger. And of the 5 readings, I think this was probably the most difficult. I believe it was only 15 or 20 pages long, but the way Heidegger wrote and the concepts in this, I thought were pretty hard to understand. So it took a lot of unpacking for this one, for my group to actually get a grasp on it. And so in this, Heidegger takes a different angle, but hits a similar nerve as Spengler does. He's arguing that the modern technology isn't just about tools or machines. Rather, it's a way of revealing the world. But in modernity, this revealing is happening through what he calls inframing. And so inframing makes us see nature as a standing reserve, which is essentially a stockpile of resources that can be extracted, stored, and used pretty much whenever we want. So forest becomes lumber, rivers become sources of power for hydroelectric dams, and even people in some ways are seen as resources in this system. And so Heidegger's main point in this is it's a warning against the mindset of inframing, which has been adopted by the West. And so he warns that this mindset is dangerous, not pretty much because it blinds us from other ways of relating to the world. In this, we're losing touch with the poetic, the contemplative, and even the sacred aspects of our existence. And it's like we've traded depth for efficiency in the world. But he does offer a solution so that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and he calls this the saving power. So in this, pretty much all you have to do is acknowledge that you've embraced this idea of inframing, but it's a lot harder to do than you think. And so it doesn't mean that we actually reject technology, but it means we need to learn to step back and see the world not just as something to use, but as something to experience fully. And so for Heidegger, this shift is crucial if we want to pretty much avoid being completely trapped by our own systems.